Our knowledge objectives are malaria and types of parasites, epidemiology, risks and vulnerability, life cycle of parasites, maturation, disease mechanism, signs and symptoms, lab diagnosis, treatment and prevention, and aggravating conditions. Malaria is a serious and often fatal condition caused by a parasite that commonly infects a certain type of mosquito which feeds on humans. The mosquito bites a malaria-infected human, which transfers the parasite to the mosquito. The mosquito then bites another human, which infects a new host. Once infected, the parasite travels to the liver, allowing the parasite to multiply inside red blood cells, where they explode the cells so they can release daughter parasites. Malaria is not contagious, but death can be prevented.
Malaria infections in the United States occur among people who have traveled to regions with ongoing malaria breakouts. Malaria is occasionally acquired by people who have not traveled out of the country, but through exposure to infected blood, congenital transmission, laboratory exposure, or local mosquito-borne transmission. Malaria surveillance is conducted to monitor geographic and demographic occurrence, treatment for travelers, and transmission control measures when locally acquired cases are identified.
In 2017, 219 million cases of malaria were reported in 87 countries. Estimated death reports 435,000 cases. In an effort to control and eliminate malaria from endemic countries, the total funding contributed exceeds $3 billion US. The US contributed $900 million in an effort to eradicate malaria. When traveling to an area where malaria is prevalent, there can be risks to anyone who doesn't take the prescribed malaria prevention medication, or that doesn't use mosquito repellent protection, and those who are constantly exposed to the outdoor elements. Those most vulnerable to malaria are those with HIV, children, and those who are pregnant. In the maturation of malaria parasites, each species has a different incubation period lasting from 6 to 42 days. The mechanism of malaria is generalized by the parasite releasing daughter cells into the bloodstream that infect and destroy red blood cells, which create hemolytic anemia. The sporozoite reproduction is asexual and occurs every 48 to 72 hours. The onset of malaria is chills, fever, and sweating. The color of malaria under a microscope derives from the hematin being released upon the destruction of red blood cells, which discolor the lymph nodes and bone marrow. Malaria can often be confused with having the flu during the onset, as fever, chills, and sweating are prevalent. Once malaria reaches the acute stage, symptoms are jaundice, enlarged liver and spleen, headaches, dry cough, and diarrhea.
Malaria can be difficult to diagnose. Depending on the person's travel to foreign countries where malaria is commonly found, for example, Africa, Latin America, Asia, the Philippines, it is commonly known to go to laboratory to detect malaria using some clinical diagnosis as blood test, QBC testing, some antibody test, antigen test, and some molecular testing, which further detects malaria, as this is a parasite that's commonly found even in the United States, that is difficult to diagnose just by physical appearance, and medical history that does not detect this kind of history of malaria. Therefore, a laboratory diagnosis, which further dives into the bloodstream and antibodies, will help detect malaria. Malaria is treated with prescription drugs to kill the parasite. These types of drugs and the length of treatment will vary depending on which type of parasite you carry, and the severity of your symptoms, your age, and whether or not you're pregnant. Some of the medication that used are called ACTs, the artemisinin-based combination therapies. In many cases, these are the first line of treatment for malaria. There are several types of these ACTs that include artemether, luciferin, codarm, and artesunate aminoquine. Each ATC is combined of two or more drugs that work against the malaria parasite in different ways. The other type of drug is the qualoquin phosphate. The qualoquin is the preferred treatment of any parasite that is sensitive to the drug. But in many parts of the world, the parasites that cause malaria are resistant to this drug, and therefore this drug is no longer any effective at all. Other common anti-malaria drugs include a combination of atopiloquine and proquinane, melifoquine, permaquine phosphate, and there are also possible future treatments of malaria. Some of the most common malaria prevention techniques are cover your limbs, use insect repellent, sleep under mosquito nets, and avoid drinking stagnant water.
Complications. Complications in malaria depends on the kind of species that you get infected by. Most of the complications remain the same, but if not treated, they can have even major complications such as coma, renal failure, diarrhea, jaundice, and even death. Malaria is an infection that damages the liver and red blood cells. It is caused by 5 different species. Malaria is a very serious problem that most people don't really seem to understand. The most common symptoms are flu-like symptoms such as fever, cough, chills, and sweats. You can get diagnosed by doing a blood smear, and the treatment depends on the species and drug sensitivity that you have. It is very important to go get tested if you have any signs of malaria because it can be deadly. Complications. Complications in malaria depends on the kind of species that you get infected by. Most of the complications remain the same, but if not treated, they can have even major complications such as coma, renal failure, diarrhea, jaundice, and even death.